Hey Messy family, I'm Curtis.
I'm Sahanity.
In this segment today, we're going to be reviewing a story time by a creator named Tiffany. And throughout this story time, she's about to tell us how she found out that her best friend was sleeping with her husband. We want to add a trigger warning. She does mention DV throughout the stories.
I'm going to try to make these as quick as possible and not drag them on for so long because I know that becomes annoying. But there's a lot to tell, and I wish I would have had some sort of forum like this whenever I was younger, going through something behind closed doors and going through it alone. So I'm grateful for TikTok now because, you know, whenever you're going through something, somehow, some way you find peace knowing that other people are experiencing the same things. My story doesn't even compare to what some people go through. And I'm going to tell my story from obviously my point of view, but you also have to realize that a lot of things that I talk on is coming from the point of view of somebody who was abused for so many years. And so I'm going to tell my story, even if it makes me look pathetic, because I begged a man to stay with me, even when I knew he was doing all these things and hurting not only me, but our family. Divorce was never an option for me, and I would have gone to the ends of the world to make my marriage work, even though it wasn't me that needed to do the work. We dated since we were 15, so I don't know any other way. I will say this, and I'll talk on it a little bit later in my story. After me and her husband found out that they were having an affair, we spent a lot of time together, just kind of leaning on each other, going through the worst thing on earth possible. And I learned more from this man in those few months, even now, than I ever learned from my husband in 20 plus years that we were together. This is getting really long, so let's just jump into it. I think I need to start off by saying we met them in 2022. My ex-husband actually went to school with both of them. He played football with her husband, and so they've been friends throughout the years, and I didn't know who they were until we moved to Abilene, our hometown. We went to a dinner. It was a random dinner that a mutual friend had asked us to go to, and that's where I met her for the first time. My ex-husband swears up and down that he didn't know who she was until we met them, I guess, that day. But I've found a lot of things as we were going through divorce, and obviously unraveling all of their lies. I found a lot of posts where he would post on social media and she was in his likes. And I know for some people that's not, a big thing or an issue or anything. And at the time I didn't see it as an issue. I didn't even know this girl. And I didn't really realize any of it until recently that she was in his likes back in 2017 and probably even before that. This is the part that scares me because my ex-husband would post our family life all the time, and how much did she already know? Because we moved all over Texas. Just how long had she been following my family throughout all those years? That first day that we met them, it was really, really awkward. Immediately walked up to them because our mutual friend was standing with them. And he walks up, my ex-husband walks up and gets excited to see his old friend, his old football high school buddy. And then he meets her for the first time. Weird. The whole interaction was weird. He met them, my ex-husband met them, and then ran off. And I was left standing there talking to these people. So that's kind of how we met. Since then, we hung out every single weekend, went out to dinners. Children were obviously intertwined even more. I did want to answer some of the questions that I had. Obviously, yes, I divorced him. Our divorce was finalized in September of last year. he filed for divorce from her, and their divorce was finalized in March of this year. I had a lot of questions about if they're still together. Yes, they are. They have no shame. They have no remorse. I say they. I'm going to be completely honest with you. Yes, I know he's still doing the acts, and I'm not trying to protect him in any way, but I've seen more remorse come from him than I have from her, because he lost a lot of things. A lot of things that he's been working towards his entire life. He lost it all. Another comment I keep seeing is put him on child support. He is on child support, and he's paying $130 towards child support. But I've heard through the grapevine, that they're always out. She's a drinker. That's where they go. I've asked him for help several times in providing for our children, because we do have 2 kids together, and we've got a lot of real life situations happening. We've got college tuition that we have to take care of. But on top of that, I have a 16-year-old daughter, and I've asked for help from him with her expenses, and he doesn't care. He doesn't care to help. I want to give background on where we came from. My ex-husband was a football coach. His world revolved around football. He was a high school football player, homecoming court. He was your typical popular athlete. Had our first child at 21, got married at 23, and then had our second child at 23. Right after we had our daughter, he got hired on in another city. I put up with a lot of things because even in college, he was definitely a womanizer. 40-year-old me looks back on 18-year-old me and thinks, you should have been smarter. I allowed a lot of things to happen that I shouldn't have. The abuse started when we were in high school. It started off with little things, him pulling me whenever I would walk away. The first time that it really happened was when I was trying to leave his house to go home because I had curfew. I was probably like 16, 17 at the time. And I was trying to get in my car, and he leaned over me while I was in the driver's seat and, took the keys from me, started hitting me, and took my purse. He would get really angry when I would say no to him. So most times I would give in, and it wasn't something that I wanted. I started first seeing real trouble whenever we moved to our first location. He would stay really late at work. And I just thought it was a coaching things. Looking back on it now, any of the other places that he went, they never stayed that late. And so it was a real struggle that first year. I had to adjust and support my husband. The real issue came whenever we moved to our next location, which was Odessa, Texas. And a coworker of his filed a complaint on him for sexual harassment. This was one of 3 teachers that complained, and 2 out of the 3 had every right to file sexual assault charges, but they both declined. He was on the news. His face was plastered all over these news articles and literally on the 10 o'clock news. I know you're thinking, Tiffany, this is it. You should have left right then and there, but I didn't. I stayed. I supported him when I shouldn't have. I had his back when I shouldn't have. I ended up getting those reports a few months after he was let go. And I read their statements, and it just made my stomach turn. We pretty much just swept it under the rug at that point. Obviously, my trust was gone. Things were never the same. If I could talk to those women now, I would say I'm sorry for believing him and not fighting for you. It wasn't even that I believed him or didn't believe you. It was just that he was my husband, and I stood by his side.
To be standing by somebody's side like that publicly as they're being charged for harassing other people, that takes a lot of strength, because everyone's witnessing you go against another woman being treated wrongly.
What would y'all have done in that situation, Messy Family? Would you have like just outed them and just shamed them and left them, or would you stuck it through? Because in that case, it's allegations. You know, stuff they saying is nothing that's been like what she
Three
said.
women though?
You know, that's crazy. Don't get me wrong, that's crazy. And it's not. I'm not to say that those 3 women lied, but they told 2 of them didn't finish the process or something. They said that she didn't. They didn't. So in that situation, how could you blame her? You know, you gonna stand by your person unless these claims are true. Then women will stand up and they'll make those decisions. I don't know why she said they didn't do it, but
I mean, it was true enough for him to get fired.
right. Because I think allegations like that in general, even right or wrong, if you're in those type of situations and depending on like the position you hold in the company, they're gonna get rid of you because it's not a good look.
Part 3 of me finding out my husband and my best friend were having an affair. He was abusive, and this is my story. Okay, I must have watched my last video a million times, and in watching that video, it just really puts it into perspective of how much I've been through with him. He was a horrible person, and I don't take away from that at all. Divorce is very real for me, and I think a lot of others take it very seriously. I know they didn't. And so there's a lot of people that were severely hurt just by how it ended. I think once I'm done with telling my story, I plan on putting it in a little box, putting it into a little compartment, and not talking about it ever again. I feel sorry for myself, what I've been through. Not sorry, but I feel so sad. Not only me, but I feel so sad for her, because I can only imagine what she must be going through within herself to hurt not only like me as her friend, but her own family. I don't feel sad for him. He still has a lot of learning to do. He still has a lot of relationships to repair, and he's not even close to starting to repair those relationships. Nobody in my family knew about the abuse. The only people, unfortunately, that knew everything that happened were my kids, because if they didn't see it, they heard it a lot. And that was the reason for our divorce. It wasn't because of the infidelity. It was because I finally was done with the abuse. The end of it all starts at the end of 2023. And I know there's some people that are like, oh, that happened years ago. Why aren't you over it now? Why are you still talking about it? But it's very real. It's very real for me. It's very real for my kids, and my entire family. And honestly, the entire city. They put that man on a pedestal. He was very well known in Abilene, Texas for football. And he didn't just break our hearts. He broke so many hearts of people that just loved him. August 23, he was abusive in the home. He did end up attacking me. He was this big football player. He's an athlete, twice my size, stronger than I could ever be. As a mother, when you sense danger, I think something kicks in within yourself that you would do anything to protect your kids. Any other time that the abuse happened, I would never fight back. I've never lifted a hand to this man. I've never even raised my voice to this man, because I knew if I did that, what was to come would be horrible. So anytime the abuse would happen, it was me, trying to calm him down, trying to distract him in any way I could. But this time I cornered him and I held him. And how I was able to do that, but I had the strength of 10 men, and I held him, and all I could do was look at my kids and scream to them and tell them to run. And then that's when he turned on me. We'd all run to the neighbor's house. And that was the first time that anybody had known that there was something wrong. There were several times throughout the years where I had tried to bring myself to say enough is enough. I had looked into apartments, I had looked into renting houses and just wanting to, pack up and leave, but I never had the courage to do it. But that day, something inside me switched and I said, this can never happen again. And so I made him leave. But of course, abuse does something to you mentally, psychologically, that makes you believe that in some way, shape, or form that this person loves you, or that that's love, and that's not the case. We had a long conversation, and I told him that the only way that it was ever going to work was for him to get help. And I don't know what kind of help that would have had to take. You can't get help until you want to help yourself. And during that time, it was me sending him the resources, me wanting him to get better more than he wanted it for himself. He still doesn't see that he has a problem or had a problem. During that time that we were apart, instead of working on himself, he spent his time going to bars and just going out all the time, talking to many different women, not once thinking about his family or his career. We both worked at a Christian institution. Obviously, any type of abuse, any type of infidelity, you would be held under a microscope and you would lose your job. So remember that. I'll touch on that in just a little bit. But at this point, he was already having an affair with my best friend before he was even out of the house. I was still communicating with her at a lower capacity just because obviously I was going through something huge. I didn't tell her what was going on. I didn't tell anybody what was going on, not even my family. Obviously my kids knew. Nobody knew because it was embarrassing. What was I gonna say? She ended up separating from her husband. And I didn't know that. She didn't tell me. Their type of separation was him sleeping on the couch while she was in her room talking to my husband. Part 4 of me finding out my husband and my best friend were having an affair. He was abusive, and this is my story. So apparently they separated after the cruise that we were all supposed to go on in July. Her husband told me that it was very sudden. They had a great time on the cruise, and when they got back, it was out of nowhere that she said she wanted a separation. She said that she was lost and she needed to find herself and all these other BS things. We were still doing things together, me and her. It was football season. My son was in high school, and so she would come with me to the games. She sat right next to me with no shame in doing so. She sat next to my family all the while she was having an affair with my husband. She stayed pretty quiet again throughout the weeks. Wasn't really worried about talking to anybody, honestly. I had pulled away from everybody, all my friends, all my family, and I just stayed to myself because I was going through the worst time in my life. There were a couple of times where I just look back on and I just think to myself, how can a person be doing something so evil but look at me straight in my face as if nothing was happening, from both him and her. He'd been in and out of the house several times, and obviously I know that was my fault for allowing him back in after everything that he had done. At this point, I'm just, begging for my family. I'm asking God to fix everything that was broken, praying for him, every single day so that he could get better. I don't see how he was able to come home to his family and look at us in the face knowing what he was doing behind our backs. But of course, he had no remorse for anything that he had done or was doing at that time. I think she felt it just a little bit at some points throughout this affair. She was still communicating with me. I mean, there was times where I would be at work and she would text me to come outside specifically one time where she was walking around my work, where he also worked, and told me to come out, and I walked with her. She had already been sleeping with my husband for a month at that point, or so they say, a month. There was several other times after that. I went to celebrate with her for her promotion at work. Celebrated with her because I was so happy for her, and I had known something was a little off at that point. I do remember that day she walked in at her surprise celebration. I don't know if it was because it was a surprise or if it was seeing me there, but she immediately started shaking, and it was very, I could tell something was wrong with her that whole lunch that we had. But I sat there with her, celebrating her, when she most likely was just with my husband the night before, I understand that people make mistakes. I understand that, people do get caught up in being lost or whatever. It's you recognizing that you're doing something wrong, but then continuing to do it is another story. So after that lunch, she texted me a really long message, saying, "Thank you for coming. I appreciate your friendship. Just wanted to let you know, because I don't think that you know yet, but me and my husband are separated." And at that point, my heart just sank. I'm just thinking, like, what a horrible friend I am for not knowing that or not being there for her during that time. I'm also going through a separation, and so I just laid it all out there for her. I still didn't tell her about the abuse. Again, I don't think that I ever planned on telling anybody about the abuse, honestly. But I did tell her that we were separated. It's crazy that we're going through the exact same thing. Sorry, I know wanting to be alone and not really trying to be around people, but just know that I'm here. Us four, me, my husband, her, and her husband, we spent a lot of time together just because after that first day that we met, we had so many things in common. Our backgrounds were the same. Our family dynamics were the same. Our children being so much alike. We just, clicked on a lot of levels. Her husband and my husband obviously knew each other from high school, but also had a very similar upbringing with their families. And so they clicked on so many levels as well. Moving all over Texas, I kind of just stuck with my family and, just the other coaches' wives. And so meeting her, it was something new, something that I had in common with somebody finally. And that's what I valued in her. And, just every conversation that we had was kind of just like looking in the mirror. And looking back on it now, it's just like how much of that looking in the mirror was something intentional on her end, which is really scary to think about. And I don't want to think about people that way, because I'm not anything great to be trying to mirror. There's still so many things that just don't make sense, and I probably won't ever get the answers to any of my questions. And that's just something that I have to be okay with. Of me finding out my husband was having an affair with my best friend, he was abusive. This is my story. So my ex-husband was a college football coach, and along with being a football coach in college, you have to go out and recruit. And so he would travel a lot. And so all of this was happening kind of during football season, and so he was out of town a lot. He had come home one day, like October, November, and he put his bags down, and then he left. And I went into his closet, and I opened his bag, and I found a box of condoms. After being together for 20 plus years, this is not something that we ever had in our home, ever. And so obviously that was a shock. It's something that I'd never seen from him ever before. And I put them in a bag and I immediately was headed up to his work to ask him about it. I wasn't going to text, I wasn't going to call. And so I got there and I parked in the parking lot next to the football stadium. And when I pulled up, my friend was there. She was parked. There is a walking trail that goes around our place of employment. Everybody would go to walk out there. So I wasn't too surprised to see her there. So I pull up right next to her, park. She's in her car, and she sees me get out, and she picks up her phone immediately and starts frantically texting. And I go up to her window, and she rolls down her window, and she says, "Is everything okay?" And I'm shaking. I've got this bag and box sitting in my car, and I tell her, "No, it's not okay." And she goes, "Do you want to walk?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Okay, hold on, let me text my kids and tell them to get dinner started." I'm like, "Okay." She closes up the window and she's immediately texting, calling on the phone. And she gets out of the car and I'm just kind of pacing, and she's like, "What's going on?" And I was like, "Can you come sit with me in my car?" So she comes and she gets in the car, and literally I'm shaking, and from under my seat I pull out this bag and I hand it to her, and she grabs the bag trembling. Her hands were shaking. We're both sitting there shaking. And she opens up the bag, and it wasn't a surprise to her seeing what she saw, because they were hers, because that's something that they were using. She tried to act as surprised as she could. She said, "Well, what are you doing? Go call him. Go talk to him." And I said, I don't know where he's at. He's supposed to be here and he's not here." And so then I look up, and around the corner, here he comes in his truck, and he pulls up right next to us, and she gave it back to me immediately, and she gets out without saying anything to me, and she looks at him and with her head down and walks around the car and gets into her car, and she leaves. So at that point, I got into his truck. I asked him about it. I showed it to him and I asked him about it. Of course, he made up a lie. While she was in my car, I said, I know something's going on, I just don't know with who. And she said, "Has he done this before?" I think if I'm snooping around and I'm, being paranoid that something's going on with somebody else, then yeah, this has happened before. Something else has happened at a previous school that he's been at. I told her that he was on the news. I told her I had looked at phone records. I told her so many things in that car that day that nobody else in Abilene would have ever known, ever. So I'm in his truck and I'm asking him. He makes up a story. He leaves. She texts me and she says, "Hey, come over to my house after y'all are done talking, if you need somewhere to go." She was trying to get more information out of me because she didn't know any of those things that I had just told her. He comes home and we go out to the truck to talk about it. Obviously, they had probably talked and gotten their story straight, or whatever the case may have been. And then he proceeded to tell me all these things that I had just told her. He said, "I know you checked the phone records." He said very specific words that I had used with her. I mean, obviously at this point I had the gut feeling that something was going on with them. And I honestly had more faith in her, obviously, that I did in him, that I was wrong. I trusted her, and I was definitely wrong. Part 5 of me finding out my husband and my best friend were having an affair. He was abusive, and this is my story. So flash forward to December 2nd, actually. December 2nd, 2023. We had gone out of town for my daughter's volleyball game or something, and we came back and I let's go spend time with our friends, specifically them. His response to me was, I'm not going out with anybody, but he was also in the bathroom getting ready for something. I text our group chat of us four, and I said, hey, let's go out. And I got a side message from her. She said, I don't know what you're doing, but you know that we're separated, and it's a little agitating. Getting that message from her, just a message from her, like very ugly, out of the blue, was the first time that I had seen that from her. My daughter had texted me. She was getting in the shower and she asked me to bring her like the body wash or shampoo or something. And so I go into my bathroom where he was getting ready after I had just sent that text message to the group. And he looked at me, of course, just went blank. He stared at me with a blank face, and I just knew what was coming. I tried to act normal, and I tried to go into the bathroom to grab the body wash, and he immediately grabbed me and started pushing me up against the cabinets and grabbing me by my hair, hitting me, on my head. He had started pulling my hair out. This was the second time that he had done that. The time before was in the middle of the night. We had been arguing about something, and he had turned around and got on top of me. And the only way I can describe it, I don't even know. He was just, pounding on my chest, but at the same time grabbing at my hair. Of course, I was yelling, and it was the middle of the night. I was screaming, for help. I just remember the sounds coming from him as he was doing it. It was very, very deep, very, very raspy, very sounds that were coming from his chest while he was on top of me, pounding at my chest and pounding on my head and my face. I finally was able to roll over. My children came busting into the room, heavy breathing, thinking somebody had come into the house. The light turned on, the lamp fell over, and we just all kind of just sat there for a second, just heavy breathing. I remember going to the mirror, just feeling the side of my head just hurting so bad, and it looked like, my whole sideburns were like shaved off, because it was just a huge chunk here, but it was a huge chunk in the back as well, and just all over my head, where he'd ripped out chunks of hair. That was the first time that he had really done that. And so on December 2nd, after I had asked him to go hang out with our friends, he had done it again in the bathroom. And this time it was even more. I mean, it was a big chunk of hair from the back of my head. That day, my daughter was getting ready because she had to go to quinceañera practice. I went into her bathroom and I told her, please hurry and meet me out in the car when you're ready. And I said, please, just like 5 minutes. And so I went out to the car. I actually drove down the street because I was afraid that he was going to come out of the house, looking for me. As I was sitting there waiting for her, my hair had been up in a bun, and I took what was left that was still up in my rubber band. And as I did that, just chunks of hair just started falling all over my car, just everywhere. And I waited down the street until my daughter texted me to say that she was ready. And so I told her to meet me at the end of the driveway. And so she did. I pulled around and I picked her up, and I went and I dropped her off at this quinceañera practice. Down the street was a police department, and I had never, ever spoken a word of this abuse to anybody, let alone a police officer, police department, nothing. I've never reported it, not once in my life. And this day I said, I have to. I have to document it somehow. And so I went to the police department. I pulled in and I just got scared. I thought he was following me. And so I left the police department. But I said, if I see a police officer, I'm gonna pull over and I'm gonna create a report. And so I did. I saw a police officer sitting in a church parking lot, and I pulled into the parking lot. It was pitch black outside, and I pull up to this police officer, and I rolled down the window, and he obviously saw that I was distraught, and I made a police report that day. I asked him to keep it anonymous, knowing very well that he could run my license plate and easily, get my name. But I had those chunks of hair sitting in the side console of my car, and he took pictures of me that day. It was the first time I'd ever talked to a police officer about any of it. I know there's a lot of people that are watching my videos that are in this situation right now. What advice I can give, because there's not anything that I can say to make you leave a situation like this, because ultimately it has to be your decision. You have to be ready. But keep it in mind. Keep it in mind to document everything. Keep it in mind to take pictures of your bruises, take pictures of the things that they break, and go and make those anonymous police reports. The statute of limitations in Texas for assault is 2 years. You may not be ready at this moment, but 2 years from now, it may be time. So that's my advice, is document everything. If you're taking pictures and you're scared that they'll go through your phone, take pictures and send them to an email that they don't know about. Just find a way to document it some way, somehow.
Just let her have them at this point.
Yeah, and then it's so crazy because she always said, like, she never told anyone about the bad in their relationship. So the friend idolizing her relationship with her husband, not even knowing that it was so much more that was going on.
Yeah, I get keeping things within your marriage, but if it's to that point, it's getting to the point that you're scared for your life and this is the type of person you're dealing with, then you gotta get somebody involved that can help you. Police, specifically. He's gonna continue to do it and get worse if you don't say anything. You're just a punching bag to him. He's just reacting because he knows that he's wrong. He know what he did is wrong 100%. And instead of admitting it, he's just lashing out like a irrational kid.
She said this abuse started when they were like 16. Like, he's been putting his hands on her at such a young age, and it's never been corrected.
Salute to her though for actually stepping out and actually filing that report. It may have took her a long time to get to this point. At the end of the day, you're still here and you was able to get it resolved. So salute to her.
Part 7 of me finding out my husband and my best friend were having an affair. He was abusive, and this is my story. In December, I made him move out for good this time. I packed his bags. I put everything in trash bags and kept it by the front door and told him to come and pick it up. He ended up renting a house that was closer to our place of employment. Still trying to navigate where we were in our marriage. I definitely was fighting for it more than he was. I started counseling. I even chose a counselor that was specifically a marriage counselor in hopes that he would come with me. We had gone to marriage counseling in the past, but we only went maybe 4 times. Every time that we went, the therapist never got a word in because he was talking the entire time. So there was never anything resolved. So I talked on this in one of my other videos, but in February, me and her had gone to dinner together, and we're sitting there and trying to catch up. She was already weird whenever she walked in. I'm asking her how everything's going with them, telling her how, horrible it is and how, devastating it is, and hoping that they find what they need. In that conversation, I'm telling her I'm telling her about all these women that I had found out that he had been talking to this whole time. And I'm giving her details about everything that I knew. And she stops me and she's just like, can we just stop talking about this? I feel like it's wrong to be talking about. I don't want to talk about it. I was like, okay. And as she was telling me her issues with her husband, she basically just said that she needed time away from him, that she was trying to find herself. And I looked at her and I told her, if he's still being an amazing, father and husband, I said, if he's not being abusive to you, then love him. I said, go to counseling, like do everything you can to make it work. She was just like, he's trying, because that man is a saint. He is an amazing father. He was an amazing husband. And every time we would go out, all four of us, while my husband was looking at everybody else in, wherever we were at, the only person that her husband was looking at was her. You can ask anybody in our hometown just how much that man loved her and treated her like a princess. She's never had to endure something so hard. Our dinner that night was pretty quick. And then I found out that 2 days later, she was out with my husband to one of the bars, Blue Barrel. It's usually where they go. The story was she basically got super drunk and he took her home that evening, and nothing happened. He just took her to her friend's house. I talked to her and she just, swore up and down nothing happened. She even got to the point of telling me, Tiffany, stop making yourself crazy, because I'm, asking her, who was he with? And she started getting angry with me, and she said I was asking too many questions. I obviously had the gut feeling the entire time, but also a part of me, I guess the naive part of me just kept thinking she would never do this. But she was my friend, and she would never do this to me. She would never be able to do it. She's a woman. She wouldn't do it, and she's a mother. She would never do it. I didn't tell her husband at that point because, oddly enough, I thought I still felt wrong as a wife to reach out to another man or text another man. Flash forward to April 3rd, 2024. I had been talking to my husband. It was around lunchtime through text. He ends up saying to me he wants to start dating people. And I'm thinking, we're married. What do you mean dating people? Not only that, what part of you does that make sense? Here in Abilene, Texas, him being out with another woman, not thinking his kids would know or his kids would see, but he wants to date other people. I called him and he answered, and I said, I think we need to talk about this in person. And so I went to his house, and since they had been out at the beginning of February, I asked him, several times about my friend. I obviously didn't want to push him too far just because of the abuse side of things. Just knowing me asking him questions, it was just always too much for him. That day when I got there, we pulled up at the same time. He had just gotten lunch. And so we walk in and sit down on the couch, and he puts his food down on the coffee table and he's eating. And we're talking, and I'm telling him how crazy this is, and I asked him about her, and I told him that if that's who he was planning on dating, then it would never be okay. It would never be okay with anybody. Our kids would be hurt. Obviously, her husband would be hurt. And his response was you just named everybody because that's how you would feel. Part 8 of me finding out my husband and my best friend were having an affair. He was abusive, and this is my story. So they had been having an affair at this point for 8 months now. Something that I had a gut feeling about, but I just didn't have any solid evidence. I had brought her up to him several times, and he just always made me out to seem like I was crazy. This day, I asked him several times as we were sitting on the couch, and I finally said, I need to know the truth, and I'm begging him, please, did something happen between y'all? Please, is it her that you want to date? And he kept saying, I don't know. As I kept asking him questions, I could feel him getting agitated. I ended up asking him one last time, please tell me the truth. And he looked at me. He said, why do I need to tell you the truth if you don't? And that's kind of the last part of what I remember. He punched me in my face. And then from there, I just remember getting hit several times in my face. He started grabbing me pretty rough as I'm sitting on the couch, hitting me over and over in my head, just kind of wailing on me. And I just remember him pushing me kind of off of the couch, and I slammed into the coffee table. My front body, I remember the coffee table just kind of scooting forward. And then from there, I just remember him looking over me as I was on the floor. I remember him kicking me so hard in my sides, on my legs, and my head. I remember him standing over me and just punching just anywhere he could get. And then I remember turning around to go for the door. And as I did that, all I remember seeing is the door slam. I remember thinking that I'm alone in this house, and every other time it had happened, my kids had been there to stop it. I was alone this time. I just remember thinking this was it, that he was about to take my life because there was nobody there to stop him. The last thing I remember was the sound of my hair being ripped out of my head. It sounded like Velcro. The next thing I knew, it was silent, and he wasn't hitting me anymore. It was quiet. And I just remember looking up at the doorknob, and I could see 3 doorknobs. And so I go to, grab for it as quick as I can, and I flung it open, and I threw myself out of the screen door. Apparently, I'd been screaming so loud inside the house that there was a landscaper across the street. He was parked on the street with a big trailer filled with branches, and I locked eyes with him. I just remember calling out for help, and I just looked at him, just screaming, help, help. I made it over to him, and he was like, do I need to call the police? And in that moment, my entire life flashed before my eyes. I had 2 seconds. If I said yes, then the police were gonna get called. That was gonna be the end of everything. I knew by saying yes that this was gonna be everywhere. I knew by saying yes that this was the end of my marriage. This is the end of my babies having 2 parents. This was the end of everything that we had ever known. And I looked at him and I said yes. While he was on the phone with the police, I felt something cold behind my head, and it touched. And when I brought my hand back, my hand was covered in blood. And it was like all the sound just came back immediately. I put both my hands back there, and my hands were covered. I don't remember a lot that happened. because I was unconscious for I don't know how long. I don't know what he did to me while I was unconscious, while this gentleman was on the phone with the police, and I'm standing there with my hands covered in blood. Jarrell starts walking up to me, him, my husband, with a towel in his hand, trying to give me the towel to clean myself, to clean the blood off. This man had to call the police twice, and he was on his way to call them a third time because Jarrell kept getting closer and closer to me. That day, I feel like it was an act of God, that man being there. When I had pulled in that day, there was nobody on that street, let alone a man who had been working there for hours, picking up branches and cutting grass and all these things. There was nobody there. I don't remember seeing anybody there. But in the time that I needed somebody the most, he was there. I said this in one of my other videos, but if you're a believer, you know that Jesus was a carpenter. This man's last name is Carpenter, and I owe my life to this man. Part 9 of me finding out my husband and my best friend were having an affair. He was abusive, and this is my story. So when the police got there, I obviously was shaken up. I was standing there with blood all over my hands, and they kept asking me what happened, and I could only tell them bits and pieces. I was still in this state of shock. They asked me if this had happened ever before, and I still was so hesitant on saying anything about our past. In those moments, I knew that whatever I said obviously was going to determine the outcome of our entire lives, and it was going to determine the rest of his life. There was like 5 people in my comments just saying, if he's been abusive to you before, then why not just leave? Why are you still staying? Why are you still protecting him? I just don't get it. And you know what? I'm so glad that you don't get it. And that just means that you've never been through anything like this before. I think this is the biggest reason why I'm speaking out and telling my story, just because I heard a lot of the same things coming from her. Saying those things to a victim of domestic violence or any other type of violence is so damaging to that victim. So when the police were asking questions, one of the police officers that looked a lot like him came up to me and said something along the lines of, he might not be the only one that could get in trouble for this. You know, if you so much as grabbed his shirt. I just thought it was odd that he said something so particular. And so I asked him, I said, I'm sorry, is he saying that this didn't happen? And he looked at me and said, it doesn't matter what he's saying. I'm listening to what you have to say. Come to find out, after getting the police records and the body cam footage, he said that he was trying to leave and I was trying to stop him. He said that I had pulled him several times through the door. He said whenever he was trying to push me off of him, that I must have tripped and fallen and hit my head because he turned around and I was unconscious. This is a story that he's been telling everybody. Obviously, he told the police, and obviously he told her. The officers, asked me if I wanted to press charges, and me not being in, obviously, the right mindset, I said no. If I would have said yes, they would have taken him away in handcuffs. I knew he would have been on the news again. After the ambulance came, checked me out, they wanted to take me in, but I declined. I said I just wanted to go home. I also told them that my things were still inside the house. I was missing an earring and I was missing my nose ring. After all of this obviously has come out and we've had a chance to review the police reports, There was absolutely no reason why he shouldn't have been taken away that day. When they had asked me if this had happened before, I did tell them about what happened in December. And they were able to pull up the police report. They read everything that I told them in that police report at the time in December. And so in Texas, I don't know if it's the same any other place, but if domestic violence happens more than once in a year, in 12 months, then it's considered continuous family violence. It automatically bumps up the charge to a felony. They ended up sending some officers inside the house. They found my earring, they found my nose ring, and then they gave me my ring, which I didn't even know was missing at that point. I was missing all those things, but I blacked out because I was trying to keep him from leaving, and that's how I lost all those items.
Thank goodness for that worker being there, because who's to say that she would have even made it outside the house? No one questioned why he didn't call the police when she was unconscious.
Nothing. This woman's walking around with all this on her hands, and you're telling her that, well, even if you just tug this shirt, and then you tell her that, well, I'm not listening to what he's saying, but it's ironic that he actually says something about the shirt tugging thing. You know, so...
He was kind of hinting at that, like, you know, if we take him in, we're going to take you in too, if you decide to press charges.
Right. But it doesn't make sense. Why would you, like, so? Like, but I think I understand, like, the more we listen to this story time, the more I'm starting to realize, like, the why. And the why is she don't want to lose her family. And it's sad because she's willing to put herself through hell to keep that family dynamic. You should be worried living with somebody like that, for real. Like, I would have to get tested, everything, like, because this man is just out here doing whatever he wants to do. And every time she gets a little, I feel a way about it, he just gets real violent. What are your thoughts, Messy Family, so far? Have you still stuck around this far in the video?
Part 10 of me finding out my husband and my best friend were having an affair. He was abusive, and this is my story. So that afternoon, I was supposed to be in a meeting. I didn't know that all this was happening, that he had called his boss and told him I probably won't be in this afternoon, or I might be late coming back to work this afternoon. He said that the police had been called, so his boss, mandatory reporter, and so he had to report that to our police department. That's when information was coming in to my work. Some sort of assault happened, and it involved an employee. When I didn't show up to the meeting that afternoon, my boss automatically knew it was me. She had called me later on, and I couldn't get a word out. She was just asking me if I was okay. She said I didn't have to tell her anything, just wanted to know if I was okay. And all I could do was sob on the phone. I didn't say much, but I just sobbed, started vomiting. So she obviously knew something horrible had happened. At that point, I cut off all communication with him. I stayed home for the rest of the week. He was placed on administrative leave, and then an investigation started. My sister had been at my house, and she didn't ask me any questions, but I think she knew obviously what had happened. I was very slow to move around. My entire body felt like I was in a car accident. So many bruises started popping up all over my body. My back, my arms, had a bulging bump at the top of my forehead. My entire head was covered in just lumps, and then just bruises all the way down to my feet. He kept on texting me and calling me after that, asking me what I was gonna do, if I was gonna let our place of employment know. He said, I need to know if I need to start looking for another job. He said, I need to know if I need to find a lawyer. This happened on a Wednesday, and on that Saturday was my daughter's birthday. I planned a little get together for her and her friends at a local restaurant. I didn't know what to tell my kids because I didn't want him there. He was, upset about that and just questioning me why I would do that. The next week when I went into work, The investigation started. He had been texting me knowing that he had a meeting like on that Monday morning at 9 a.m. asking me what I was gonna say so that he would know what to say. He kept telling me, please, I can't go through this again, talking about the Odessa sexual harassment investigation. He kept sending me messages like, I can't do this anymore, I can't live like this, I can't go on, all these things. So he had his meeting. I don't know what was said. Obviously, he didn't tell the truth about what had happened. I'm still just trying to navigate everything that had happened. I'm still trying to process everything. I'm still dealing with the concussion that I had. I'm still dealing with all of it. Still trying to figure out what I need to tell my kids. That was the hardest part, just not knowing what to say to them. So I went into my meeting and I sat down and I said, I've been dreading this, to be honest with you. I just want to disappear. I just want all of this to go away. And I said, I just didn't know what I was going to say. At that moment, for the first time in my life, she looked at me and she said, Tiffany, the only thing that you can do is tell the truth. And that's all she had to say. That's all I guess anybody had to say to me, is tell the truth. And that's what I did. I unloaded 20 plus years of things in that meeting that day. Part 11 of me finding out my husband and my best friend were having an affair. He was abusive. This is my story. Also want to add, I'm getting to the end, I swear. My story goes so much deeper than just the infidelity part of it, because he was a cheater. He was a horrible person. He should have treated me so much better. He should have had enough loyalty, if not to me, but to his children, and he didn't. Now that I'm out, I look back, and I'm not going to say it's been easy, because that would be a lie. Even knowing everything that he's done today, it doesn't make it any easier knowing that he's a terrible person, a crappy person, all the things that he's done. It doesn't make it easier on me, on my family, but I'm healing, and it's a slow process, because I am taking it day by day. These past few days of me telling my story, actually telling every piece of it, has been a lot of healing in some areas that I've needed that healing, or I've need that realization of, everything he did was super horrible. So during the investigation, I let them know everything that had happened. I told them that he had been abusive in the past. They saw the bruises. Not only that, but while I was in the investigation, I had the biggest bruise on my thigh. I mean, the size of 2 hands on my thigh. And I was able to lift my pants high enough. They went through my text messages. I gave over my phone of all the messages that happened that day. And on April 24th, 2024, Jarrell was fired. He's not a coach now. He'll never be able to coach ever again. I had then filed for divorce, and on the same day that I filed, I went up to the police department and I asked to press charges. Part 12 of finding out my husband and my best friend were having an affair. He was abusive, and this is my story. So I know a lot of you are waiting for me to get to the point of where I found out that they were having an affair. So I'm getting to it, and I'm hoping that this is going to be the last video, or maybe one of the last videos. It is kind of draining. It's draining, but at the same time, it's super eye-opening just to relive it and actually speak it out loud. I don't know, just hearing a lot of different perspectives, and just really recognizing how sick of a man he is. I think the next few parts are super important for me to say, just because I do want to educate people on the words that they speak, can be so incredibly damaging to somebody who is already going through something so hard. I know people still won't care, and they're gonna, break down people because they too are struggling with something within themselves. So for my last video, my then husband had gotten fired. I filed for divorce and pressed charges. My work was so incredibly amazing. They gave me the resources to reach out to our local crisis center, a women's crisis center, which I never knew existed. I didn't know that there were these resources available. Keep that in mind if you are going through something like this, domestic violence, any type of violence, that there are resources available. They paired me up with an attorney. All my fees were paid. This attorney helped me get a protective order. Protective orders are not easy to get. You have to have substantial evidence that there was some sort of violence involved. It was an emergency protective order. He was not allowed to come within 200 yards of me, my employment, and that still stands. That's still in place. I've heard of restraining orders, but they are two totally separate things. You can't just go and get one at the local courthouse. You have to go to court, and we did. I had to get on the stand, face him. That's a whole nother story that I think I'll tell at some point. He tried to make up a story about what happened. He even got on the stand and lied. So with regards to my then best friend, in May, I stayed to myself. I didn't tell anybody. I barely even told my sister. She had to hear me testify. It was one night I was doing my homework. Her husband actually reached out to me. He texted me and he said, just checking in, just wanted to, make sure you guys were okay. I'm thinking he's reaching out because he had found out about what had happened. I told him, hey, I'm doing okay. I was just kind of testing the waters, just trying to figure out if he knew. And so I asked him if he had talked to my husband, and he then told me that, he's tried, he's reached out to him, he's prayed with him, sends him words of encouragement all the time. I told him how his wife had been just kind of standoffish, the same, just very quiet and just has pulled away from me. And he told me, yeah, she's going through it. She's not the same. And then I told him, I said, do you think it's a little weird that my husband is being standoffish and she's also being standoffish? And there was a pause and he said, hold on. Before he got off the phone, I was like, wait, I think you should know that he attacked me. He assaulted me on April 3rd. I've filed for divorce, and I also have a protective order on him. And he was just like, Tiffany. He then called me back like 5-10 minutes later, and he said, yeah, they've been talking. She says that it's just a friendship, but yeah, they've been talking for a while now. He asked me if I knew anything else, and I told him that they had been out February and that they told me that nothing happened, that she got drunk and he took her to her friend's house, and that was it. Nothing else happened. At that point, all the things that she had been telling me since February, nothing happened, haven't talked to him, he's crazy, I would have socked him if he would have tried anything with me. Just thinking this whole time she's been lying to me. I'm the one that felt bad for even bringing it up to her. For me, in that moment, none of it mattered. I was still going through the worst time in my life. I wasn't worried about what he was doing. I had several conversations with her husband after that. Him just kind of finally realizing why she was being so horrible to him. She wasn't trying to work on her marriage or the issues that they were going through during their separation, because she was having a jolly old time with my husband. Same thing with my husband. While I'm trying to fix everything and make everything work, which I know I shouldn't have been, he was having a jolly old time, not thinking anything of his family. June or July, I was talking to her husband one evening, and he told me the night that he had asked her if she had been talking to my husband, he also told her, "You do know what he did to Tiffany. He assaulted her. She's got a protective order on him." Her response was, "She's a liar. I saw her 2 days later and she didn't have a scratch on her." Part 13 of me finding out my husband and my best friend were having an affair. He was abusive, and this is my story. At that point, nothing mattered. I literally dropped to my knees. It never even came up in my mind that people wouldn't believe me. At that point, the affair didn't matter. Felt so incredibly hurt. And it wasn't a stranger who said it. It was another woman. It was a mother. But most importantly, it was somebody who had been my friend. The moment that I finally had the courage to speak out against my abuser, the moment that I finally let 20 years of abuse out and cried for help, she called me a liar. I ran to my son at that point, and he just hugged me. Not only was she calling me a liar, it was like she was calling everybody involved a liar. Everything that we had been through, essentially calling every woman who has been in this type of situation a liar. To this day, nobody else has ever questioned what I've had to say. I cried for hours, and I know it's not up to me to prove anything that I've been through. It's not up to me to show people, to make them believe me. My sister said it best. She said, "You're going to be met with people who find it really, really hard to believe that he was this person behind closed doors." I get it. It's such a horrible story that it is hard to believe. If you know our family, it's incredibly hard to believe because that's not what we put out into the world. I told my sister, I want to show her everything that I have to prove it to her. And she was just like, "You don't have to do that." But I did. As I'm on the phone with her husband, just hyperventilating, I told him, I said, "I have a video of him assaulting me. It's pretty hard to watch." I sent it to him. So he went to her, showed it to her. She watched the full thing. And he said that she was mortified and she was disgusted. I spent the next few days home, didn't go to work. I don't know why that hurt me. It hurt me so incredibly bad that I just shut down all over again. She had seen me 2 days later. It was at my daughter's birthday. I was covered in bruises. My arms had bruises all over them. And of course, the big lump on my forehead. The only bruises that were visible. I'd seen her while I was walking one evening. I asked her why would she be there for him after he had just done something so horrible. I asked her why she believed him. She goes, "I saw the bruises, but he wasn't arrested, so what was I supposed to believe?" Because he hadn't been at that point. Come to find out that while he was on administrative leave, they were going out in public, going to have coffee and all these other places while he was on administrative leave, and not once did she question him. I'm going to try to wrap it up, but she went back to her husband and they tried to make it work. I'm skipping a whole bunch of parts, but just for the sake of not creating another video, and maybe I will to answer some of the commonly asked questions, but started counseling. The entire time they were in counseling, she continued to see my ex-husband. I mean, she denied the affair until she couldn't anymore. And in August, she finally came clean because they were celebrating a birthday. The entire time she was super agitated. She kept looking at her phone, texting, just being uneasy. Later on that evening, she came clean to her husband. She said, "I've been sleeping with Jarrell since September of last year, and he's threatening me to tell everybody if I don't. Her husband then called me. It was super late in the evening. He said, "You were right." Because I'd been asking him, like, do you really believe it was just a friendship? Like, to know how much trust he had in her, to believe her every time that she said nothing had happened. He said that he should have known better because even on their wedding day, she had called her first love or her first boyfriend before she got married. At the end of August, we had our mediation for our divorce, and in that mediation, they asked me to sign an NDA, and I declined, obviously. Jarrell ended up violating the protective order by calling me so many times. I mean, all day long. It started that morning, and it didn't stop until that evening. I was terrified when I started getting those calls because I hadn't talked to him since April. As soon as I started getting those calls, I called 911 because I was still at home getting ready for work, and I couldn't even move. I got to work and the police escorted me to my office, and the calls just kept coming. He was then arrested for violating the protective order. He was actually arrested on the day that our divorce was finalized, which was September 30th. Her husband then filed for divorce, and she begged him to postpone it. Jarrell finally had his arraignment on October 31st for the assault on December 2nd and April 3rd. I once again had to face him in court. He took the plea deal where they deferred the December 2nd charges, and he would plead to the April 3rd charges. He ended up pleading no contest to April 3rd. Again, since he didn't have any previous criminal history, they only gave him a year probation. This was for the assault on April 3rd and also violating the protective order. Since he was never formally arrested on December 2nd or April 3rd, after court was over that day, they took him away in handcuffs.
I just want to say they both are very disgusting individuals. Like, to be first of all, messing with married people is disgusting in general. There's no way you can justify that. Like, these two are actively married, and as a friend, you took advantage of her. Like, you saw a weakness in her marriage and you exploited that. I'm not excluding what the husband did. Like, what he did was disgusting as well. But man, I'm just happy, honestly, to see that she actually got through the divorce process and that she pushed herself all the way through, because it seems at the end of the day, justice was served in a sense. You know, she at least stood up for herself. I don't know what's the standard amount of time a person should get for that type of abuse. And the courts are just funny, though. I don't understand. 1 year probation, I feel like it was a slap in the face, though. I feel like they should have gave her a few more years so that way she can get her life in order and maybe even move away before his restraining order is over. But a year is like a slap in the face.
It's so wild to me that even though the friend saw the bruises, she still was on the other guy's side. Like, oh, he didn't do that, or, you know, right. That proves nothing. But it took for her to see the video and to later on be threatened by him. She tried to warn her what type of man he was, and she just completely ignored it until she was put into the situation herself.
Right. I feel like her husband had suspicions, though, because why else would he reach out to the wife? You know, he wasn't able to reach out to him. I feel like he had suspicions. Like, he had an open ear to it, at least. Making that call to her actually was a blessing in its disguise at the same time, because then he was able to see the problems within his own marriage. Which is crazy. Like, the woman has actually had the audacity to try to get him to delay the divorce process. Like, what was the thought process behind her wanting that? I'm just curious.
For her to call her first love before she gets married, if that doesn't show her character, wow.
I was gonna keep it to myself about that one personally, because I had a lot to say. I was gonna pause and say something right there, because that's ridiculous. But yeah,
she was questioning her marriage from the beginning.
That's a red flag, right? And what do y'all think, Messy family? Is that a red flag? telling your first love that you're getting married, that would have quickly got you divorced, or would have quickly got that ring snatched back in the middle of the night while you're sleeping. And I would have been disappeared.
Thank goodness Tiffany got out of this relationship safe. Her children are safe. And at the end of the day, that's what.
Yeah, prayers out to her family, her children and her, healed through this properly. And I hope that they find peace in this situation as well. I hope you don't live with a lot of regret. It's not your fault. Like, just the typical things that we hear throughout story times of people saying, and I know it's personally how that feels, like to feel like you made a mistake, but you didn't make a mistake. That was truly all on him. It's nothing you could have done better. You even tried to go to counseling in the midst of all of this stuff going on. And you knew that he was cheating, and you knew that he was abusive. So I can say you at least tried your best. But with certain people, it's just best to get out of it before it becomes a bigger issue. But what do you guys think, Messy Family? Let us know in the comment section if you watched the video to the end. We do appreciate you guys. Don't forget that you can submit messy stories to our email account, messylifestories@gmail.com. So if you guys want to submit either story times of your own, or maybe you got some reference story times that you want us to review on this channel, you can email us at that email address. But until the next story time, Messy Family, peace out.